So the industry right now is going under some major changes with regards to M&A, and you think of the big headline that has the most recent big headline was Charles Schwab and TD Ameritrade announcing the merger yet to be approved, but still that's a big transaction. I think that's two of the top 5 custodians in the country coming together that are serving independent advisors, and then you look at United Capital getting bought by Goldman. And what Goldman is now doing with that to try to get into the space, there's a lot of change happening. And M&A is big and rampant, and roll-up advisors and these aggregators are a big trend. And the question really gets to is, what does this mean for the traditional advisor, right? The independent advisor that wants to be independent on their own. Are they going to reach this point where they're just not able to compete because of sheer size and gap between the ability for these big firms to put in money and invest in innovation and R&D, and they are not able to? What does that look like in your mind?
I think it's like twofold. I mean, so for one, I know a lot of advisors are worried because of Schwab and TD, and that their custodians are changing, and which there's always going to be more custodians and things like that. So that's one concern I know a lot of advisors have. But when it comes to the being able to compete, I think it actually presents some opportunities for smaller shops, just because, I'm sure you get this, every organization, institution, the bigger they grow, the more the bureaucracy. You see this with any institution. And, frankly, I used to work for Schwab, and it would take 2 weeks to get a compliance approval to send out a birthday card. And when you're a small solo shop, you just can do things so much quicker, so much more efficiently. And basically, because you move quicker, you can provide better client value. You can do things that would take, or jump on opportunities that would take, the United Capitals of the world too long to jump into. So I think there's a lot of actually exciting opportunities for smaller shops.
I think that's a good point, right? It's the idea of, these bigger firms, as you continue to get bigger, you're building a bigger ship that's harder to turn, right? And so it's harder to innovate and iterate. And even though they have money doesn't solve all the problems. It's not that you can't just throw money at all problems and have them be solved. Then you have to be able to iterate and change. And I use this example a lot within our company, just because we're a growing younger company, and we have the ability to iterate and evolve and change and learn and move on and test new things and be really quick in that process. There's 2 separate types of people and 2 separate types of firms. And you have the firm or the person that sits on the beach when you're looking at an ocean, you're trying to get from point A to that rock out there. And they sit there and they try to plot the right exact way, the fastest way, based on how the waves and the wind and everything of that nature. And then there's this other person just gets in the boat and goes.
Yeah.
And then the person on the beach is looking at them, they're going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and it looks like they're being crazy. But they're learning more out there than the person on the beach, because there's things that you just don't know until you try it, that you get out there. And the reason I say that is I think that a younger, smaller firm has the ability to be that zine ship and learn a lot quicker than these bigger firms. It's going to take them a lot of time because they have to go through all these hoops, and then they're going to go and they're going to move, and then no matter how much money they put in, how much planning, whatever consultants they bring in, they're going to learn something. At some point, they're going to have to reassess and then start over. And I think that's you have to accept that as an advisor and really let that be your MO, because not all clients are going to want to work with big brands. They still like there's still a lot of people, a ton of people out there that want to work with kind of just the relationship, family-run type shop.
Yeah, and actually, I think there's a lot of business value in staying small, kind of like you're saying. It allows you to fail quicker, which in the business world is a good thing. I love my old Mike Tyson quote of everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face. And it's kind of the same thing with business, where if you're a United Capital and you have to go through all these budgeting and compliance, and then you find out it fails after a month of work, where you're a smaller, nimbler shop and you could find that out in 3 days. That's a tremendous value. And you're starting to kind of see this play out, but a lot of bigger bureaucracies are actually changing their models. And there's actually a lot of thought that the monopolies of the day and the bigger behemoth corporations are going to be dying out in the next 10, 20, 50 years, just because that bureaucracy has proven just to not be an effective, efficient model. And you look at Google right now and how they've restructured. Google is not one company. It's 30 different companies just under one umbrella. And we're going to see more and more of this, where companies would rather just be small and nimble and increase profit margins as a way to grow, as opposed to just getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Right.
I mean, like again, Google, you have Alphabet, but then you have Nest, you have Google Search, you have Google Ads,
and it allows each of those companies to run and iterate and sprint and move fast at one time, but you still get the benefits of a larger corporation, which is a whole different way than, like, you think about like the GEs of the day, right? Like, it was GE had everything, and you look at Procter and Gamble, you look at Johnson and Johnson and Unilever and some of these like conglomerates, they're starting to sell off of those companies because they've realized how difficult it was to keep margins healthy and to get everything to run and innovate and stay up to date with all of these different companies doing all of these different things. Yeah. It's a challenge. Yeah. It's a big challenge. I think that what this also shows, that M&A space, is that, it makes people think about how to run their business.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. How do you create a scalable, efficient business? Maybe you don't want to sell it, but how do you, the industry now is getting a lot of people coming in and helping to build businesses, as opposed to just financial advisor practices. What does it mean to be a business in your mind? And then what's the framework? I mean, what can people think through when it comes to like building a business as opposed to just a book of business or a practice from that standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is something that a lot of advisors struggle with, and there's a big difference, to your point, in like the traditional small advisor they just had in my opinion, a bunch of relationships where they happened to manage their friends' money. Yep. Like, that's kind of been the standard model, where it was like a lifestyle practice, not necessarily a business. There's nothing wrong with lifestyle practices by any means, but even today, I think those lifestyle practices, to stay competitive, need to at least just run like a business. And the kind of analogy I use with this is, if you go into a McDonald's, every McDonald's is the exact same. The reason you know it's a business is because they have the exact same processes for how they work with clients. From you driving up to you leaving, like, everything is plotted out. And that's what gives you a good, repeatable process. I mean, the food may not be the best, but I mean, like, same with like, Ritz-Carlton. Like, they have a process for how they go above and beyond for clients. They have a process for room bookings and cleaning and all that stuff. Like, that's what creates the business, is having those repeatable processes in place. But by also having those repeatable processes in place, it allows you a lot of flexibility, because the necessary things are taken care of. So that allows you to get into those like important things, like all their finances are taken care of. Like, I know I'm buttoned up in that, but then now I can go deeper in, like, when a client has a loved one die, like, I'm not worried about like missing a paperwork. I can focus on what's important to them.
Right.
And so that's where I think that's the area where having that business piece in place, those repeatable processes, one, is great from a business standpoint, but also from a client relationship standpoint, because you can, you've taken care of the necessities. Now you can focus on the important stuff.
Yeah, and I always use this example, and sometimes it doesn't hit home with everybody, but it's like the peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And there's two takeaways that I have with a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Very simple, right? But a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, if I were to say to you, go make a what are the steps to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? And then I ask person Jim Smith over here how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, I'm sure that y'all are going to give me some different directions, right? So some of you may just say, go get the ingredients, take the knife, put it on the bread, and then Jim is like, well, I have to go open the pantry, I have to get the bread, open the bread. And the thing is that how you interpret those instructions are going to be different. And what that example says, because if you really break down peanut butter and jelly down to the core of how to make it, in terms of holding the knife, putting the knife into the peanut butter, into the jelly, spreading it evenly, all of those, there's like over 50 steps, literally, of making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. But not everybody goes detailed. And the reason I say that is that you have to think about every process you do in the same way that you would think about breaking down to the smallest task possible of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, if you want to standardize the processes, right? And then what you also learn from that is because you take it for granted of how simple it is to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, you forget about some of those steps and the time that goes into it. Whereas if you're making thousands of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, you could probably do it quicker if you understood how to make efficiencies on some of those easy tasks. And so the peanut butter and jelly sandwich example allows for advisors, any business owner, to understand and really take a step back and find those like menial tasks that can be eliminated in the process, is one. But then two, if you are able to document it that way, it creates a standardized way that you can go and expand and feel confident that everybody's going to do it the exact same way, because you've broken it down so precisely that it's impossible for someone to do differently. And that's what, I mean, in theory, that's what McDonald's did. I mean, McDonald's is a real estate company if you've ever seen the movie, but I get it. But they broke it down into that way.
Yeah.
And that's what advisors have to do when it comes to running a business. And sometimes running the business means that you don't have revenue generators at head executive roles, right? They may be the operations person. They're focused on making sure all the operations are running. They may not be a revenue generator. And I think that's hard for especially early advisors to understand from that standpoint.
Yeah, and I just thought of a great analogy based on like what you're talking about with the peanut butter and jelly, like to kind of put it in an advisor perspective. Okay, so like we all know peanut butter and jelly is a simple process, but okay, let's say you have 100 peanut butter and jellies that you got to make lined up. Well, if you're doing it with a knife, like and getting jelly out, it's going to take a long time to get the knife out, scoop.
Yep.
But if you think through that and then say like, okay, now they have like nowadays they have those like just squeeze bottles, where it's be much quicker to just go squeeze, 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 squeeze than knife. Same kind of thing is like, okay, we all do the exact same emails. Like I guarantee every advisor sends every client a repetitive email. All you have to do, template.
Yep.
And next thing you know, that's the equivalent of that one minor detail, that one minor step, like you're saying. If you really break it down, instead of typing out the same email every single time, just template it and customize it a little bit to the client, and boom, done.
You now saved, maybe you're like, oh, but so the thing is the problem is that as human beings, all of us do it, is that we're like, it only takes me 30 seconds. And so I'm like, I'll just do it this way because it's only 30 seconds. I don't want to change the way that I'm doing it because it's 30 seconds. But then you start doing it, 30 seconds start adding up to now minutes, to then hours, to days, to weeks, to months, etc., which is real time.